Welcome to DCF Investigations. There are mysteries that sit on the edge of human understanding, cases where the facts are laid out in plain sight, yet the picture they form makes absolutely no sense. We often look to crime scenes for clues of violence, for motives born of greed, jealousy, or rage. But what happens when a crime scene suggests something else entirely? What happens when the evidence points not to a struggle against a perpetrator, but a struggle against reality itself? Tonight, we are journeying back to the winter of 1978, to the rugged, unforgiving terrain of the Plumas National Forest in Northern California. We are here to examine a case that has haunted detectives, families, and internet sleuths for nearly half a century. It is a story of 5 men, a desolate mountain road, and a silence that has never been broken. This is the exhaustive, comprehensive story of the Yuba County Five. To truly understand the gravity of this tragedy, we must first understand the 5 men at the center of it. In the media, they are often grouped together simply as the boys, a term that was used affectionately by their families, though they were all grown men ranging in age from 24 to 32. They lived in Yuba City and Marysville, comprised of tight-knit communities in California's Central Valley. These men were bound together not just by friendship, but by shared circumstances. They were all enrolled in a vocational rehabilitation program for adults with intellectual disabilities or mental health conditions. They were a team, quite literally, as they played basketball together for a group called the Gateway Gators. First, there was Theodore, known to everyone as Ted Wire. At 32 years old, Ted was the oldest of the group. But in spirit, he possessed a childlike innocence that endeared him to everyone he met. He was a large man, friendly and open, the kind of person who would wave at strangers and lacked the capacity for cynicism. He worked as a janitor and snack bar clerk. However, Ted also had what his family described as a lack of common sense in dangerous situations. He was known to take things literally and relied heavily on the guidance of his family and friends. Then there was Jack Madruga, age 30. Jack was an Army veteran, having served in the chaotic years of the late 60s. He was a man of routine and pride. He was the driver of the group, the owner of a cherished 1969 Mercury Montego. Jack was high-functioning, employed as a busboy, and was known to be incredibly protective of his vehicle. He was not the type of man to let anyone else drive his car, nor was he the type to take it off-road or into danger. His car was his independence. Bill Sterling, 29, was a close friend of Jack Madruga. Bill was a gentle soul, deeply religious, and spent much of his time at the library reading to pass the time. His mother often said he hated to go anywhere alone. He was the peacemaker, the quiet presence who sought comfort in the company of others. Jack Hewitt, 24, was the youngest. He was more dependent than the others, struggling with a more severe degree of disability that made him deeply reliant on his father and his friends. He was easily led, a follower who would stick close to the group, particularly to Ted Wire, whom he often shadowed. Finally, there was Gary Mathias, age 25. Gary was the outlier in the group. Unlike the others who had developmental disabilities, Gary suffered from schizophrenia. He had a history of drug use during his time in the Army, which had led to a psychiatric discharge. By 1978, however, Gary was reportedly doing well. He was medicated, working in his stepfather's gardening business, and was a star player on the Gateway Gators basketball team. However, his medication was crucial. Without it, his grasp on reality could fracture. The date was February 24th, 1978. It was a Friday. The mood among the five men was electric with anticipation. The Gateway Gators had a massive game coming up the very next day. It was the first game of a week-long tournament sponsored by the Special Olympics, and the winners would get a free week in Los Angeles. For these men, this was the Super Bowl. They had laid out their uniforms, their high-top sneakers, and their jerseys, ready for the Saturday morning tip-off. But before their own game, they decided to take a road trip. The plan was simple and completely routine. They would drive 50 miles north to Chico, California, to watch the UC Davis basketball team play against Chico State. Jack Madruga gathered the crew in his turquoise and white Mercury Montego. They left Yuba City in high spirits. The drive to Chico was uneventful. They arrived at the university, watched the game, and cheered as UC Davis won. Witnesses who saw them at the game reported nothing unusual. They were just five friends enjoying a night out, acting appropriately and having a good time. After the game ended around 10 p.m., they piled back into the Montego to head home. They stopped at Bears Market in downtown Chico to stock up on snacks for the drive back. The clerk remembered them vividly because it was closing time, and she was annoyed that a large group had walked in. She watched them buy a Hostess cherry pie, a Langendorf lemon pie, a Snickers bar, a Marathon bar, and 2 Pepsis and a quart of milk. This detail, the specific purchase of junk food, would become a haunting piece of the puzzle later. They left the market and drove south, presumably heading back to Yuba City, a straight shot down Highway 99. It should have taken them less than an hour. Their parents were waiting up for them. These were men who checked in, men who stuck to routines. When the clock struck midnight, then 1 a.m., then 2 a.m., the families knew something was terribly wrong. But by morning, the police were notified. The Gateway Gators forfeited their game that Saturday. The Yuba City Five were gone. The search began immediately, but it was hampered by the geography and the weather. We are talking about the Sierra Nevada foothills in winter. The terrain is dense, unforgiving, and prone to sudden, violent snowstorms. For days, police patrolled the highway between Chico and Yuba City, looking for skid marks, broken guardrails, any sign of a crash. They found nothing. It was as if the turquoise Mercury Montego had vanished into thin air. It wasn't until 4 days later, on February 28th, that a break in the case occurred. A Forest Service ranger was driving along the Oroville-Quincy Highway, a winding, treacherous mountain road far to the east of where the men should have been. And this road leads deep into the Plumas National Forest, gaining thousands of feet in elevation. It is not on the way to Yuba City. In fact, it is in the completely opposite direction. Near the Rogers Cow Camp, at an elevation of 4,400 feet, the ranger spotted a vehicle. It was the 1969 Mercury Montego. The car was stuck in a snowbank on the side of the road. But this was not a crash site. The car was not damaged. The investigation of the vehicle raised more questions than it answered. The car was found with the driver's side window rolled down. The doors were unlocked. Inside, the wrappers from the snacks they had bought at Bears Market were present, along with basketball programs and maps. But the car itself told a strange story. When police examined the undercarriage, they were baffled. The road up to that point was a rugged, potholed dirt track that would usually tear up a low-riding sedan like the Montego. Yet, the undercarriage was pristine. There were no scrapes on the muffler, no dents in the oil pan. This suggested that whoever drove the car up that mountain did so with extreme care and precision, navigating the obstacles perfectly in the dark. Furthermore, the car wasn't truly stuck. It was high-centered on some snow, yes, but the tires had not spun. There was no mud sprayed everywhere, indicating that the driver hadn't tried to rock the car back and forth to get it out. The gas tank was a quarter full. The engine started immediately when hot-wired by investigators. 5 healthy men could have easily pushed that car free. Instead, they had abandoned it. They left a working vehicle, and with the heater capable of running, to step out into the pitch-black, freezing wilderness. Why did they go up that road? The Oroville-Quincy Highway is not a road you take by accident. To get there from Chico, you have to miss the turn to Yuba City, drive east for miles, and then navigate a turnoff that leads into the mountains. It's a deliberate route. Some theorize they took a wrong turn, but Jack Madruga knew the area. He was a careful driver. Others suggested they were chased. But there was no damage to the car, no sign of a collision, and no other tire tracks noted at the scene. The discovery of the car triggered a massive search of the surrounding forest. Search and rescue teams, dogs, helicopters, and snowcats combed the area, but a severe blizzard rolled in almost immediately after the car was found, dumping feet of snow on the mountain and covering any tracks the men might have left. The search was called off due to the danger to the rescue teams. The mountain kept its secrets for the rest of the winter. During this agonizing wait, a bizarre witness testimony emerged. A man named Joseph Shans came forward. Shans had driven up that same road on the night of February 24th to check the snow levels for a weekend ski trip. His car had gotten stuck in the snow just a bit further up the road from where the Montego was found. While trying to push his car out, Shans suffered a mild heart attack. He was stranded, in pain, sitting in his car with the engine running to stay warm. Shans claimed that late that night he saw lights appear behind him. A car pulled up and stopped. He saw a group of people, whom he described as men, and a woman with a baby, standing in the headlights of the other car. Desperate for help, Shans called out to them. He honked his horn. He said that as soon as he made noise, the lights went out. The people stopped talking. It was dead silent. Later, he saw flashlight beams outside his window. He called for help again, and the lights instantly vanished. He claimed a pickup truck arrived later and then left. Shans eventually ran out of gas and walked 8 miles down the mountain in the morning to get help, passing the abandoned Montego on his way. Shans's testimony was controversial. He was in the throes of a heart attack, delirious with pain, and possibly hallucinating. The detail about the woman and baby never fit the profile of the 5 men. However, on the core of his story, that he saw the Montego arrive and that the occupants refused to help him, suggests a terrifying possibility, that the men were afraid. Were they hiding from him? Did they think he was the threat? Or was Shans simply seeing phantoms in the snow? Months passed. The snow began to melt. In June of 1978, a small group of motorcyclists were riding through the remote trails of the Plumas National Forest, about 19 miles away from where the Montego had been found. They came across an abandoned Forest Service trailer at a site called a campground. The trailer was damaged, a window broken, but it was a shelter. Inside, they found a scene of horror. On a bed in the trailer lay the body of Ted Wire. The condition of Ted's body told a story of prolonged suffering. He was wrapped in 8 sheets, once attempting to stay warm. His feet were badly frostbitten. But the autopsy revealed something even more tragic. Ted had not frozen to death immediately. He had lived for weeks, perhaps up to 3 months, inside that trailer. He had lost nearly 100 pounds, wasting away from starvation. Here is the most baffling part of the entire case. The trailer was a food storage depot for the Forest Service. Just outside the trailer, in a shed that had been opened, was a propane tank that could have fueled the heater in the trailer. The valve was never turned on. Inside the trailer and the storage shed, there were enough sea rations and dehydrated meals to feed all 5 men for a year. Dozens of cans were unopened. Ted Wire starved to death in a room full of food. Why? Why didn't he eat? Why didn't he turn on the heat? Investigators found that a few cans of food had been opened with an Army-style P-38 can opener, a device Jack Madruga and Gary Mathias, the veterans, would have known how to use. But the vast majority of the food was untouched. It was as if they were waiting for permission, or were too terrified to make their presence known. As the snow continued to recede, the fates of the other men were revealed. The remains of Jack Madruga and Bill Sterling were found about 4.5 miles from the car and over 11 miles from the trailer. They were essentially skeletons, scattered by scavenging animals. The autopsy indicated they had likely died of hypothermia not long after leaving the car. One of them lay in a wooded area, the other nearby. It seemed they had sat down to rest and never got up. Jack Hewitt's remains were found by his own father. In a heartbreaking turn of events, Jack Hewitt Sr. had joined the search parties in June. He spotted a pair of Levi's jeans and a backbone. It was his son. Jack Hewitt's skull was found later, 100 yards away. That left Gary Mathias. The searchers found his tennis shoes inside the Forest Service trailer. This suggested that Gary had made it to the trailer with Ted Wire. The shoes were significant because Gary's feet would have swollen from the frostbite and the cold, forcing him to take them off. Instead, he might have put on a pair of leather shoes that belonged to Ted, which were missing. Despite exhaustive searches of the surrounding woods, the canyons, and the ravines, no trace of Gary Mathias was ever found. He simply vanished. This leaves us with the reconstruction of the nightmare. We know they abandoned the car. We know Madruga and Sterling succumbed to the elements halfway to the trailer. We know Ted Wire, Jack Hewitt, and presumably Gary Mathias continued on, walking 19 miles through deep snow in street clothes and basketball sneakers. This physical feat is almost impossible to comprehend. It would have required superhuman endurance. Once they reached the trailer, something prevented them from saving themselves. Ted Wire lay in that bed, frostbitten and starving, while Gary Mathias presumably watched over him or eventually left. Did Gary's schizophrenia play a role? Without his medication, which was left in the glove compartment of the Montego, Gary would have been deteriorating rapidly. Did he slip into a state of paranoia? Did he convince the others that they shouldn't eat the food because it wasn't theirs? Or did he leave the trailer to find help and perish in a location that has never been discovered? We must also consider the psychological profile of the group. Ted, Jack Hewitt, and Bill Sterling were men who followed rules. They were conditioned to listen to authority. If they were in a strange place, breaking into a government trailer, eating government food. They might have been paralyzed by the fear of getting into trouble. They might have been waiting for someone to come and tell them it was okay. The tragedy is that their obedience and gentle nature may have been the very thing that doomed them. Let's dive deeper into the theories, because in the absence of a survivor, speculation is all we have. Theory number 1. The accidental detour. For this theory posits that the men simply missed the turn to Yuba City. Perhaps distracted by conversation, they kept driving, realized they were lost, and tried to loop back through the mountains, mistaking the Oroville-Quincy highway for a shortcut. Once the car got stuck, they panicked. Fearing anger from their parents or police involvement, they decided to walk to find help. But this doesn't explain why they walked up the mountain into the snow instead of back down the road they came from, where the air was warmer and civilization was closer. Theory number 2. The chase. This is a popular theory among those who believe the car was driven too carefully to be an accident. Did someone run them off the road? Did a confrontation happen at the game or the convenience store? If they were being chased, it explains why they abandoned a working car and fled into the woods. It explains why they didn't turn on the lights or the heat in the trailer. They were hiding. But who chased them? There is absolutely no evidence of a second vehicle, other than Joseph Sean's confusing testimony. Theory number 3. The Gary Mathias factor. Gary was the only one with a history of severe mental illness and drug use. He had friends in the town of Forbestown, which was roughly in the direction they were heading. Did Gary convince the group to make a detour to visit someone? Did he have a psychotic break during the drive, forcing the others to continue up the mountain? Some investigators speculated that Gary might have led them on a forced march, fueled by a delusion. If he was the leader in that moment, the others would have followed. If he told them not to eat the food, they wouldn't have eaten. The fact that his body was never found adds a layer of suspicion, though it is just as likely he walked out into the snow to get help and died in a crevice or thicket where he remains to this day. Theory number 4. The Joseph Sean's connection. Some have speculated that the men did see Sean's. Perhaps they saw a man slumped in a car, acting erratically, and thought he was the danger. Or maybe they tried to help him, and his delirious reaction scared them off. It is a chilling thought that 2 tragedies were unfolding on that road simultaneously, mere yards apart, without ever connecting. The forensic evidence regarding Ted Wire is the most haunting aspect. He lost nearly half his body weight. This takes time, a long time. He was alive in that trailer while the search parties were flying overhead. He was alive while his parents sat by the phone. The beard growth on his face confirmed he lived for weeks. It is a slow, quiet horror. The discipline required to starve to death next to a pantry of food is difficult to reconcile with the instinct for survival, unless the mind has been convinced that eating is the more dangerous option. The legacy of the Yuba County Five is one of enduring sadness and unanswered questions. The families were left with a grief that had no closure. Jack Madruga's mother insisted until her dying day that her son was not lost, that he had been forced up that mountain. She knew he would never treat his car that way. The families of Ted Wire and the others were left to wonder what happened in those final, freezing weeks in the trailer. Today, the case remains open, though it is colder than the snow that buried the Montego. Modern forensic techniques have little to work with, as the physical evidence has long since degraded or been lost to time. The trailer is gone, dismantled years ago. The road is still there, winding through the dark pines, keeping its watch over the valley below. When we look at this case, we are looking at the fragility of the human mind. We see how quickly routine can shatter. We see how group dynamics can lead to irrational decisions with fatal consequences. We see the terrifying power of nature to swallow us whole. Was it a wrong turn? A mental health crisis? A flight from a phantom attacker? Or was it a tragic combination of all three? A perfect storm of confusion and fear that led 5 gentle souls into the dark? We may never know what was said in that car as the lights of the valley faded behind them. We may never know why they walked into the snow. We only know that they went together, and in the silence of the Plumas National Forest, they stayed together until the very end. This has been a deep dive by DCF Investigations. If you have a theory, no matter how obscure, about what happened on that mountain in 1978, I want to hear it. Do you think Gary Mathias made it out? Or is he still out there, waiting to be found? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Stay curious, stay observant, and until next time, keep watching the shadows.